Good evening, my compachos. It's Ren Presents time. I am your host, Ren, and today we continue with the Shadow Tech Goddess, Part 1, Chapter 5, an Encoded Message. So last week, we got to find out a little bit about this crazy entity, the Shadow Tech Goddess, and if you know me at all, if you're familiar with my work, you know I love ambiguous villains, or characters that could be villains. Hard to say, and the Shadow Tech Goddess is one of those. There are plenty of villains in this book, but is the Shadow Tech Goddess one of them? Guess we'll have to find out. But rather like the Dark Lord Sauron from the Tolkien world, the Shadow Tech Goddess is less of an active character and more of a force, a guiding hand, a possible consequence. Now, I'm not talking about Sauron from the Second Age of Middle-earth, where he was just a sort of a pretty boy, the Lord of Gifts, who incidentally had his ass kicked up to 3 times with the precious on his finger when Numenor got sunk beneath the waves by God of the Lord of the Rings, Ilúvatar. Sauron went down with the ship and drowned, and his spirit had to make its way to Barad-dûr. So Sauron was getting his butt kicked all the time with the ring, but then in the Third Age, he had no body, was basically just a guiding force, a presence. And I love villains like that, or characters like that don't really have a physical manifestation. It's just they're everywhere but nowhere. And such is the case with the Shadow Tech Goddess. She's a person who may or may not exist. Now, she exists alright, but does she exist in this terrible universe-destroying form as the Shadow Tech Goddess, or is she just a mundane, ordinary woman? Don't know. We'll find out. The Black Abbess, who is the head of the Black Hat Sisterhood, seems to think she's a real threat and is taking steps to find this person and take her down. So, we found out about the Shadow Tech Goddess this week. We continue with an encoded message, and this chapter is only 4 pages long, so if I'm up to it, if I'm feeling energetic and frisky, we will then proceed to chapter 6, which is known as Cat. And if you have read or listened to my previous book readings, you know exactly who Cat is. And yes, it's Cat. It's just same old Cat. It's Cat. It's totally Cat. But a different sort of cat, as she was in this original incarnation. So she's going to be different. Ooh. Anywho, we'll see if I feel like continuing on. I don't know. I haven't made up my mind yet. Anyways, let's begin. Part 1, Chapter 5, an Encoded Message. The next morning at 8 bells, the Hoban Knight appeared abeam the Seeker. The ship hailed, and Melazar was put off via Ripcar. Stenstrom, being the ship's paymaster, wrangled out and observed the payment to the ship for her service before Melazar boarded. She didn't go without a struggle, and was salty to the point of being violent. She had put her flash-ons back in and was lighting up hard. "So, Belle," she hissed as they entered the Ripcar Bay. "When next we meet, you're gonna be hiding in your room again like you did this time, you rotten muck spine?" In her Hoban heels, she was eye-to-eye with him at 6 feet 7 inches. "Next time," Gwendolyn said, "by tomorrow morning you shall be several light years away, sweating it out on Xandar. I bid you a pleasant trip, and I'm certain the dry, roasting climate will do wonders for your pores." Melazar scowled at her with lit-up eyes. "If you're all I have to worry about, babe, then I'm not worried." She turned back to Stenstrom. "You slag. Next time, you and me are going to be on the floor, wrapped up, I promise you." Gwendolyn tried to step between them. "Your Ripcar is waiting, madam," she said icily. Melazar got very close, her breath moistening Stenstrom's ear. "Let me clue you into something. You never meet a Caroline once. You're going to see me again. I'll be back to save you from this frosty piece of rump you've been attempting to pleasure yourself with, and I'll show you what a real woman can do." He felt the heat from the light coming out of her mouth. The tip of her tongue touched his earlobe. Then she pulled away and climbed into the rip car. "Ta!" she said, giving him a wide-eyed harlequin stare as the hatch closed, her eyes shining and face lighting up through the glass. They watched the rip car pull away and out of the containment field. Gwendolyn sighed. "Well, thank the elders that's over." Morgan stood there and watched the rip car soar away. She leaned toward Stenstrom. "Hey, Belle," she whispered. "She wasn't kidding. She's no dunce in the sack. I could barely get up this morning." Stenstrom and Tara walked onto the bridge. Aram stood at the helm. "Our friend gone?" he asked, hanging on to the pegs. "She is, heading to Xandar in first-class comfort," Tara said. "Alesta will be glad to hear it. I've never seen her so unnerved before. She was nearly inconsolable at breakfast this morning." Stenstrom approached Aram. "Madame Caroline was that off-putting?" "Off-putting?" He thought a moment and turned the wheel a peg or two. "I wouldn't say that. I thought she was intriguing. If I didn't have Alesta, I might have taken her up on her offers." Tara smiled. "Me too. I heard Morgan took the plunge." He headed for his office, Tara following. He plopped down behind his desk and took his hat off. Tara seated herself in her usual spot. "So, how did Gwen respond to Melazar?" she asked. "Not well." There was a knock and Morgan entered. "Rough night?" he asked. "More than you could know." She seated herself and gave Tara a wink. "I've got the information. I know where the Anatameter should be taken." Stenstrom was surprised. That was fast. Gwendolyn has the Anatameter down in engineering right now, doing creation knows what to it. "So where'd you get the info from?" "From our guest, Melazar of Caroline. You told me Queen Wendelnight had mentioned Melazar is a Merton. I checked. A Merton is a herald of sorts, and Rodrigo of Bergen was going to slice her open and burn her to get information of some sort. Sure enough, she is carrying a message within her." "In her guts?" Tara squealed. "That's really gross. Various people, these Mertons, from time to time, carry information within their vitals," Morgan said. "We call them EVs, for Encoded Vitals. We don't know how the information gets there or why a particular person has it while others don't, but sure enough, it's there. We suspected the sisters of doing it, selecting people as unwitting messengers to convey information without fear of it being intercepted or detected." "But you found out wrong, right?" Tara asked. "You found out the sisters weren't doing that." "Did we? We're still investigating. In any event, there was a whole litany of information inside Melazar's body, and Bergen was going to kill her for it." "So what did you do? How did you extract the information?" Stenstrom asked. "Various ways. Sometimes it's a simple matter of reading bumps and tick marks, usually found on the interior of the small bowel, that sort of thing. Sometimes sex does it with a controlled release of pheromones. That seems to be what the sisters favor. And, as in Melazar's case, burning will do it too. So what did I do? After we are finished our nasty, nasty little business, I slipped her a mallet and went to work. Made a small incision in her abdomen and inserted an arthroscope. I discovered that her encoding is triggered by heat. I used pinpoint intense heat and then immediately healed the damage. And there it was. A whole story in bits and pieces. Rather remarkable to see it firsthand. After I was done, I closed the incision, and she never knew a thing happened." "What did you discover?" Stenstrom asked. "Now remember, I was reading everything in bits and pieces, and I probably missed a lot. Burning her would actually have been a much more efficient method of reading the information. Hidden in the Clovis ruins in Cana's Viflin region is a secret complex that was once used as some sort of dimensional gateway to a secret place free of the sisters' influence. Apparently, many Vith strongholds have something similar. The gateway no longer functions. The sisters did away with it long ago. According to Melazar, the Clovis once stumbled upon a place of evil inhabited by a being they called the Shadow Tech Goddess. They were very afraid of this being, so much so that they sought help from the gods of Camera. Of all places, the gods came and corrected the problem with an Anatameter. Not your Anatameter, a different one. There are lots of Anatameters, most inaccessible. Queen Wendelknight said she was from Camera. Yeah, then she might even be a god. The old Vith spoke in secret of these tall and beautiful people from far away who safeguarded the universe and seemed to have mastery over death and time. In the Clovis ruins is a place where the Anatameter once sat, a socket, if you will. When the sisters shut down the Vith's pocket dimension, the Anatameter residing there was no longer needed and was removed by persons unknown, though probably by the gods. So that's where yours goes, in the ruins of Clovis, in the old socket. It's still there. Stenstrom shrugged. All right, that doesn't sound too difficult. Assuming I can find this socket and install my Anatameter, we'll do it this very day. We don't have anything on the boards today, do we, Tara? Nope. Morgan looked concerned. But Belle, some of the other things I read trouble me. What things? Like I said, I didn't get it all, but much of what I did read concerned old cults and pagan shrines and shadow tech and human sacrifice. It also mentioned places like Punt, Camera, and Ing. I don't know what Punt is, but Camera and Ing, those places were once our home world many millennia ago. Those places are lost to us, Belle. Ask Gwen. We don't know where Camera and Ing are anymore. Like Lemuria, they're places of legend. Too much time has passed. And there was mention of monsters that follow this device around, hoping to make use of it. Tara, who had been daydreaming, came back to attention. Monsters? What sort of monsters? Demons, extraplanars, cursed entities, old gods, and other beings that pursue devices like these, hoping to make use of them for their own ends. According to mythology, an Anatameter is very powerful. The most frightening entity was something called a Tempest Findal, a sort of wandering zombie. It's all alone in the universe, seeking its opposite, and it destroys and ruins everything in its path. It's immune to the Anatameter's power and can cross the planes at will. It's some sort of chaos bringer. Sounds cool, actually, Tara said. Stenstrom laughed. Well then, we'll fulfill our part of the bargain, we'll take it to Clovis, and that will be all. Morgan got up, pushed past Tara, and got in close with Stenstrom. But what about the Tempest Findal? What about it? Don't underestimate it. Morgan's eyes grew large and intense. All right, I'll research and devise defenses. This creature, whatever it is, won't be a factor. And with that, we conclude Part 1, Chapter 5, an encoded message. So, Paymaster Stenstrom thinks this Tempest Findal monster won't be a factor, but if you know me, you know it's gonna be a factor. We're gonna get a healthy dose of the Tempest Findal. I can't wait. Yes. Anywho, so Paymaster Stenstrom discovers that Morgan knocked Melazar out, opened her up, and did a little reading, basically burning her entrails and repairing the damage right away. Found out where this Anatameter is supposed to go. I guess when I wrote this, I didn't examine any ethical or moral entanglements that would come with doing involuntary surgery on somebody, even though she didn't hurt Melazar. It seems kind of shady. Maybe in this modern age where we're all a lot softer than we used to be, that sort of thing would be completely verboten. But when I wrote it, I didn't think twice about it, and Morgan didn't think twice about it. And Melazar wasn't harmed, so I guess it's all good. But still, kind of like, wow, okay. So they have to take it to the ruins of Clovis. And if you remember the cat reading, you know exactly where Clovis is, ruins deep in the mountains of Vithland, and basically the most lonely and inaccessible part of Cana, deep in the mountains in Vithland, and that's where it is. Apparently, as Morgan explained, the old Clovis, before they fled the League and became Zaphans, during the Great Betrayal, by the way, had, well, if you've read the Bloodstein books, you know that all the Vith had their Gellertron. It's basically a mystical dimensional doorway that could take you to many places. And one of the places was a area or a world that was free of the sisters' influence, that the Vith could go and there are no sisters to snoop in on what they're doing and impose laws and rules and try to dominate it like the sisters tend to do. And they had a Gellertron, but their Gellertron took them to a scary, scary place where there was this creepy entity known as the Shadow Tech Goddess that they were mortally afraid of. And it was one of the reasons why they fled the League in the first place, to get away from this creepy entity. They beseeched the gods of Camera for help, and the gods gave them this Anatameter and built this socket for it to sit in, and that closed off the dimensional gate. It basically shut down their Gellertron. That was that. So that's where this Anatameter needs to go, to the old socket in the ruins of Clovis. Next chapter, part 1, chapter 6, Cat. I guess y'all are making me happy, so I'll just go ahead and read the Cat chapter 2. And yes, as I said before, this is Cat. This is the Cat we grew to know and love during the Cat readings, which is the most recent book in my League of Elder series. This is Cat, the same character, but a very different version of Cat, as you will see. Let's dig in, shall we? Part 1, chapter 6, Cat. So why didn't Morgan want to come with us today? Gwendolyn asked. She's always keen to tag along on these shore missions. She said she wasn't feeling well, Stenstrom said. Ah, well, I get you two handsome gentlemen all to myself. It was a wonderful chilly morning as the Ripcar came down through the high clouds, the vast carpet of grayish mountains stretching off into the north as far as one could see. Aram flew the Ripcar with Gwendolyn and Stenstrom sitting in the passenger seats. Morgan's usual seat was empty, occupied instead by a wooden lunch basket prepared by Lady Alesta. The three of them, all good friends, were laughing and chatting. Gwendolyn, feeling at ease, let her usual guard down and hung all over Stenstrom. She noted Aram's stylish glasses. Have I told you how handsome you look in these, Aram? They very much suit you. Thanks, he said, blushing. Does Lady Alesta favor them as well? She does, but she says she also favors the old black things I used to wear. Sentimental, I suppose, since I was wearing them when we first met. She keeps them in a box on her nightstand. Oh my, Gwendolyn said, pinching his cheeks. She sniffed the basket. Smells good, Aram. What did Alesta pack for you this time? Lady Alesta always packed Aram a basket of lunch when he went down to the shore. Chicken, I think, and as usual, there's enough for all of us. What will we do without Lady Alesta? Stenstrom said as he watched the gray mountainous land far below come into focus. Go hungry, Gwen replied. Aram laughed. Oh, that's my lady. After we finish up, can we take some time out and eat it before heading back up, Belle? Sure, Aram, sure. I love Alesta's cooking. Whenever Stenstrom wanted to go somewhere, Aram, the master helmsman, usually took him, leaving the ship in the care of crewman Joels, the junior helmsman. Aram had tried to teach Stenstrom how to fly on several occasions, but he had no feel for it, couldn't generate any harmony of control, so better to just let Aram do it. A complex of ruddy buildings scrabbled into the side of a mountain like a wrecked train came into focus. Stenstrom leaned his head over as far as he could, brushing the containment field. That looks like it down there, Aram. Clovis, or what's left of it anyway, abandoned since the great betrayal centuries ago. Belle, Gwen said. I'm amazed you know that. Yeah. Find a suitable spot and bring us down, he said. Stenstrom thought he saw somebody moving about in the ruins from this altitude. Just a black dot. It felt sinister. Just a hunch, though. Morgan's talk of old gods and extraplanar creatures was firing his imagination. Aram circled the area and found a flat spot several hundred yards to the south of the ruins. After they landed, he dropped containment, and they all climbed out, their breaths steaming in the chilly Vithland air. Stenstrom hoisted his mega-eye and peered into the forlorn ruins. He spied black, darting movement in the distance and clearly saw the figure he'd spotted from above moving towards the stony hills. Look there, he said. The figure glided away like liquid. What? Gwen asked. You see that? Gwendolyn and Aram looked around. See what? Aram asked. Movement, out there, Stenstrom said, pointing. Gwendolyn grabbed his mega-eye and hoisted it to her face. I don't see anything. She panned about. Snatching Stenstrom's mega-eye without warning was a bad habit Gwen had acquired. Probably a mountain goat. I doubt that. Never mind. All three of them straightened their coats and popped their hats on. Aram wearing a handsome fleet triangle hat, replacing the huge pink broad-brimmed adjutant's hat he once wore. Stenstrom checked his ents and slid them back into their sash. If there was someone skulking about, they would not lack for protection. Gwendolyn hung the mega eye around her neck and clipped on her fedula, a long rapier-like sword. She also pulled her Mims pistol and checked her clip, then cocked the pistol. She was very particular about her Mims, even though the gun had such a small caliber and grain size per slug. It was virtually useless. More for show than anything. Stenstrom reached into the ripguard and picked up the Anatameter. He held it gingerly in his hands, wondering how he was supposed to fit it into the socket. We couldn't find anything during our investigation, Gwendolyn said, waving a hand at the Anatameter. It's just a rock. And an ugly, uninteresting one at that. Well, good. We shan't miss it then once we figure out where it's supposed to go. He slipped it into one of the larger pockets inside his HRN. Off in the distance was a line of fallen stone structures of old Clovis. Gray, just like the towering mountains all around. Aram leaned into the crew compartment and hipped the rip car's comm. "Comm," he said. "Comm here," came a reply. "Please let Private Tara know we're down. We'll check in again when we're done." "Aye." "Safe shores." Out. He then powered down the rip car. Aram pulled a small red and green scarf from the rip car and put it on, along with a pair of black gloves. "Did Lady Alesta give you that scarf?" Stenstrom asked, noting the familiar Marian colors and symbols. "She made it for me." "Ah," Gwendolyn said. "You two are so cute." Fully kitted out, they crunched through the stiff grass, the somber ruins quickly approaching. Ahead, before the perimeter of ruins, was a small bronze statue mounted on a granite plinth. "What's this statue here?" Gwendolyn asked. "Looks like a Vith lady, fairly new. Perhaps that's the figure you saw, Belle." "Maybe. I doubt it, though." The statue depicted a slender woman in a gown, her head up, shoulders back, holding a system glyph. Her dainty arms were molded in a demure yet dramatic pose. A plaque bolted to the plinth read, "The ruins of Clovis abandoned in 000000 AX. A scholarly expedition was conducted here in 003720 AX by Grand Dame Hannah Ben Sherlamp, EVOR, University of D, and her esteemed party. All has been revealed as a result of this expedition. There is nothing further to be learned. Please see Professor Sherlamp's published works for further information." "Can you believe the nerve of this person?" Gwen asked. "Apparently there's no need for us to search about, for Hannah Ben Sherlamp EVOR has discovered all." "Pah! Perhaps she knows where this device needs to go," Aram quietly offered. "Unlikely." Stenstrom laughed. "Come along, Gwen. You know how scholars are. Let the lady bask in whatever glory she may." They moved past the statue, Gwendolyn giving it the evil eye. "Hey, Belle," Aram said. "Do the thing. Come on, do the thing." "Oh, please, Aram. Come on!" Stenstrom had learned quite a bit in the past year. He discovered that he, as the Sister's Fist, could pretty much do everything the Sisters could, including using TK at a hyper level. He lifted Aram gently into the air. Aram spread his arms like a bird in flight and savored the feel, his scarf fluttering. "I love this," he said as Belle drifted him towards the ruins. The ruins of Clovis were stout and fairly intact. A number of smaller structures surrounded a larger, more fallen down one in the center. The architecture was typical Vith, ornate and splendid. They heard only their steady footfalls and the somber cry of the wind. Occasionally, they caught sight of a massive parafly buzzing about. The party sorted through several of the outlying structures. Lined with leaf litter and other nesting materials, a hollowed-out building had been inhabited by a successive generation of various wildlife. Gwendolyn peered into one of the empty windows. "Do we have any idea at all what we should be looking for?" Stenstrom peered in next to her, and she leaned her head on his shoulder. "Some sort of secret area where this Anatameter goes, probably underground somewhere." Gwendolyn smiled brightly. "Fortunately, I took the time to perform a bit of study on these wretched Vith ruins. Somebody has to do the intellectual legwork." Bell. This structure here is the wheelhouse. That one over there is the cistern. All three headed for the cistern. We're looking for the Shadowtech goddess's cistern, Stenstrom said. The building was just hollowed out shell, with a depth of dank standing water waiting at the bottom. Doesn't look promising to me, Aram said, unless the area we need is underwater. They moved on. Eventually, they made their way into the fallen structure of the main manor house, mostly a pile of shifting rubble. It hadn't survived the centuries as well as the other smaller buildings had. Gwen and Stenstrom sat down, their legs getting tired from all the rummaging around. Stenstrom gingerly set Aram down. "Well, I'm stumped," Stenstrom said. "Any thoughts?" "Well, these ruins have only been here for centuries, Belle," Gwendolyn said, placing her cold hands into Stenstrom's pockets. "Wow, is it cold. We're gonna have to dig in our heels and search a bit harder." He pointed north. "I do see a chapel in that direction. Let's have a look." "Oh, Belle, must we?" "My feet are killing me," Gwendolyn said, pointing at her boots. "There's nothing up there except more of the same." "Mine are hurting too," Aram said, sitting next to Gwendolyn. "Come on, let's head back to the rip car and eat." Gwendolyn put her arms around Aram and rubbed his shoulders to warm him up. "How is it that your feet are hurting, Aram? You've been flying around this whole time." "I don't know, but they are. Must be sympathy pains." Stenstrom rose and dusted himself off. "All right. Come on, let's go." "You could just toss that silly thing, and anywhere it lands is as good as any," Gwendolyn said. With a fuss, they trudged north through the central section of the ruins. Stenstrom noticed something. He froze. Wait. Stop." They both looked back at him. "Belle, what is it?" Gwendolyn asked. "He was just becoming acquainted with the sisters' gifts. When he visited them in their distant temple, they were remarkably mum as to just exactly what he could and could not do. They were too busy giggling and touching him on the shoulder. He'd figured out the TK thing on his own, and he found himself speaking with his mind every so often. He struggled against that. He didn't want to speak with his mind. And he could apparently detect Shadowtech just like the sisters could. All around the ruins, plain as day, he saw an impossibly dense amount of cloaked Shadowtech traps, like a plague of insects. Invisible STTs were favorite calling cards of black hats. The black hat assassins loved leaving them behind to create chaos and mayhem. The sisters were usually very good about discovering and clearing them out, but here in Clovis, they were everywhere. "I see STTs all over the place." Gwendolyn was alarmed. "Shadowtech traps? Here?" "Yes. Aram," he said, turning to him. "Don't move." Aram swallowed. "Why?" "Because there is a particularly large one crawling up your back." Aram turned white. "Aram, don't panic. Just stay still." Where is it?" "It's right by your head. It has legs around your neck right now." In his sister sight, the STT looked like a black robotic cockroach with an ovoid body and small head rotating on a thin neck. Its Shadowtech legs were fastened around Aram's shoulders. He was on the verge of panic. What's it doing?" he whispered. Although Stenstrom could see the STT, he couldn't determine what it was pre-programmed to do. An STT could be set to do any number of things. It could attach itself to a victim and immediately explode in a searing Shadowtech fireball. It could cling there and covertly spy on the person, or create misfortune, or kill loved ones. The possibilities were endless. The trap suddenly expanded, enveloping Aram in a black film of Shadowtech. Aram collapsed to the ground. "Aram!" Stenstrom shot forward, Gwendolyn joining him. He quickly lifted her into the air TK so that STTs couldn't attach to her as well. "Belle, it's suffocating him!" She struggled as she floated. The Shadowtech was forcing its way into Aram's mouth and down his throat. Stenstrom waved his hands, trying to dispel it like the sisters did. Nothing happened. Just for once, he wished the sisters might share techniques with him, train him. They expected much, but it was all on-the-job training. Aram didn't have time for him to learn by trial and error. He concentrated and waved his hands again. The STT smoked as if it were on fire. Another wave, and it was gone. Aram instantly sputtered and gagged for breath. "Belle!" Gwendolyn cried from above. "There's a black hat! To the north!" She drew her Mims pistol and fired. The STTs laying about the rooms came to life like a plague of locusts. They surged forward, some climbing into the air to attack Gwendolyn, others diving for the two men. With a swipe, Stenstrom managed to get rid of quite a few of them, but others attached themselves to his legs and arms. Aram was fully covered after just a moment, as was Gwen. Stenstrom picked Aram up, STTs and all, and TK'd out of the area, coming to a landing near the rip car. Aram was in some sort of suspended animation, his cheerful red and green scarf smeared in black. He brought Gwendolyn down. She, too, seemed to be in a shadow tech-induced stasis. The STTs around them were complicated and deep-rooted. Without knowing how they were programmed, he could cause more harm than good if he tried to disperse them. He could kill them right off. He had to try, though. Aram and Gwendolyn could be dying. He set to work. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," a sneering voice said in his mind. He turned. On the roof of the wheelhouse, a black cat crouched on all fours, like a cat ready to spring. He sensed her gazing at him for a few moments, before she gracefully launched herself into the air and landed on all fours on the scholarly statue of Hannah Ben Sherlamp a few feet in front of him. She wore black, with bits of scarlet mixed in. A little black shirt, with baggy sleeves down to her elbows, was laced up to her neck. Her forearms were wrapped with black bandage-like strips all the way down to her wrists. Her hands were bare, her fingernails, painted black, were long and curved like a bear's. A baggy pair of black pantaloons went down to her knees. Her calves and ankles were also wrapped in black strips, just like her arms. Her feet were partially wrapped up, though they were mostly bare. A tight-fitting black head mask had a large hole cut for her eyes, which were sparkling green. He could see the bridge of her nose and hints of her shadow mark dancing around her right eye. Enemies of the sisters, the Black Cats had an unrivaled command of shadow tech. They were always fierce, of an evil disposition, and a constant threat to the League. Though several had been tamed in recent history, his friend, Countess Sigillus of Blanchfort, was an ex-Black Hat. She reminded him of a cat ready to fight or pounce on a mouse. She even had a tail of shadow tech that moved slowly over her head, ready to strike. Well, what have we here? A male sister. Who would ever imagine such a thing, she said, her voice a gravelly crawl. She jumped down from the statue, still crouching, and they slowly circled one another. "What have you done to my companions?" he demanded. "Got them in my little web. Yes, I do." Her voice stretched into a demonic shriek. "And they're never getting out." Morgan had warned him that monsters followed the Anatameter, and now he was face to face with one, a Black Hat assassin. He sidestepped to his left. She uncoiled and sprang, taking a swipe at his face. He caught her hand in midair. Her nails were danced in micropoint shadow tech, sharp at an atomic level. They could slice through anything. She must be Knife, the Black Hat the sisters had intended him to follow. But she didn't look like Knife, as he remembered. This woman, dressed differently, was different size and shape altogether. She seemed taller than Knife had been. But still. "Knife," he said, holding her hand. "Release my companions immediately." Her leg lashed out and she kicked him square across the face with her heel. He threw her down to the stone. She made to spring again and he belted her across the cheek. She fell against the base of the statue, dazed for a moment, then recovered, her shadow tech tail flicking wildly. Again they circled. "Your companions belong to me," she said, rubbing her chin. "As do you." She swiped at the statue of Hannah Ben Sherlamp with a laser claw of microfine shadow tech, cutting it clean from the base. She lifted it with her tail and threw it at Stenstrom. He caught it and held it aloft like a club. She was very mobile for a Black Hat and willing to engage in a hand-to-hand encounter, something most Black Hats avoided. Her eyes flicked to the silver HRN lettering on his collar. Then she attacked, slashing and kicking, trying to climb up on top of his shoulders. He shoved her off and tried to hit her with the statue. She raked it with her claws, sending it raining down in small cube-like bronze bits. So much for Professor Sherlamp's nice statue. She spun around and landed a solid backfist on the side of his face. She then tried to hook his legs and fall on top of him, but he held firm and pushed her away. They stood there panting. The Black Hat seemed to be enjoying herself. She made a trilling, sort of purring sound through her mask. "What is your name?" she asked. "You know who I am, Knife," Release my companions. They have nothing to do with this. She straightened a little and spoke. It was strange hearing her speak. Knife had sworn she would never speak to him again. You speak as if I should know you. I don't know you, she whispered. You do know me. Your name is Knife. She snickered. My name is not Knife. If I were to tell you my name, you'd have to take me home with you. And she loosed a small ball of shadow tech that quickly formed into a cinder black cat. You don't want that. Stenstrom wasted no time and vanished it. She was on him, holding on with her legs. She put her claws against his chest and raked them up and down, hoping to gut him. His shirt shredded into ribbons, but no blood came. She hadn't been able to cut him. Stenstrom seized her by the throat and slammed her down to the stone. She tried to pull his hand away. She flailed and kicked, but he held her firm. She smoked the beginnings of a waft to teleport away. No, 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 he said. You're not going anywhere. He squeezed a little tighter and she recoiled, her raft falling apart. I suppose I'm just going to have to save my friends on my own. She spoke in a choking whisper. Got a hand on their souls, I do. Take it off and they die. Kill me and they die. He picked her up and threw her against the remains of the granite plinth. She coughed a little, trying to clear her throat. That wasn't nice, she rasped. My friends, release them. I'll not ask again. She composed herself. Your friends are fine as long as I wish them to be fine. First, I have questions for you. Not negotiable. Ask your questions, Knife, and be done with them. She locked eyes with him. My name is not Knife. Let us make that crystal clear. She reached up and pulled her mask off. There was a girl with whitish blonde hair and a pleasing, somewhat heart-shaped face underneath. Nice teeth, interesting shadow mark. She was not Knife. Who are you? He asked. We do not say our names. What is your name? That is my first question, and I demand you answer it. You might place a curse on it. Your name. Answer. Now. Stenstrom, Lord of Belmont, South Tyrol. She puzzled for a moment and reformed her shadow tech tail. It flicked about her head. How is it you can do what the sisters do? If I knew for certain, I'd tell you. She glanced at the Ripcar and pointed. Do you have any food? Why, are you hungry? Yes or no? I think Aram brought down something for lunch. His fiancée usually packs him something. Well then, shall we? It'll be our first meal together. Careful to keep his eye on her, Stenstrom reached into the Ripcar and pulled Aram's basket out. A few feet away, the black cat seated herself, sitting cross-legged on the cold ground. Her tail flicked by her head in a hypnotic fashion. All they were missing was a tablecloth and a violinist, he mused. Come now, half. We've not all day, she said. I'm hungry. She pushed her messy blonde hair out of her face and smacked her lips. Stenstrom set the basket down and opened it. The scent of chicken drifted out. Inside, wrapped in a cloth, was a loaf of chewy Marion bread, along with a covered ceramic bowl filled with baked chicken, a bottle of sweet raspberry wine from Calvert that Aram was partial to, and, Stenstrom secretly hated, and silverware, and a little folded note on a homemade paper from Alesta. He tried not to look at it, but he glimpsed a heart drawn on the folded interior of the paper. Aram and Lesta, so in love, and there Aram lay, locked in a black hat's STT, his life and his soul in jeopardy. He set the food out. The black cat seized the loaf and tore into it, devouring it as if she hadn't eaten in some time. She seized the wine bottle by the neck and chugged down the contents. He removed the cover off the bowl of chicken and she pulled out several pieces, eating them bones and all. Are you not taught manners in all those places of darkness you inhabit? Black hat, he asked, a bit disgusted. She looked at him and made a kissing motion with her greasy lips. Care to teach me some? Half? Why are you calling me half? What's half? You are half. I call you half because you have H-A-F on your collar. Half? No, that's H-R-N. Did they not teach you to read either? She seemed to take exception to that and chugged another swig of wine. She finished eating and wiped her hands on her sleeves. She reared back and loosed a satisfied, juicy belch. Yes, well done, he said with disgust. Right, you have eaten. Now release my friends. The black cat stood, rubbing her full belly. First, you and I are going to take a short walk. Yes, we are. Where are we going? There's a hidden place just up those mountains. She pointed into the distance. I'm going nowhere with you. Then both your friends are gonna die. Kill my friends, then I kill you. The black hat was smug. So much killing, Mr. HRN. Seems to me everybody's gonna die today. And all could be avoided with a simple walk. I thought you League fellows were supposed to be reasonable. She got up into his face. She smelled of devoured chicken and Calvert wine. Will you swear to release my friends afterward? I swear to nothing. She pointed to the north. Come now, just a short walk and you may possibly have your friends back. Unharmed. They began walking, Stenstrom retracing his steps through the ruins, only this time the black hat walked at his side. What does HRN mean? She seemed remarkably eager to talk, something he'd heard black hats were loath to do. I don't understand. I looked at the letters. They are HAF. The letters are HRN. Did the Black Abbess not bother teaching you to read? Again, she seemed stung a bit. And what does HRN stand for? I'm really not interested in sharing a conversation with you, Black Hat. They trudged through the central ruins. He looked back every so often, seeing the blackened masses of Gwendolyn and Aram sitting by the ripcar near the ruins of the statue. The Black Hat moved at his side, her Shadowtech tail flicking as she walked. Ahead was a disused trail heading up the steep mountain face. Nimbly, using her hands, legs, and her tail, the black hat bounded up the side, passing him. Come along. Stenstrom, not being much of a mountain goat, carefully stumbled up. Are you having difficulties, HRN? She called down. I'm not a cat like you. I could TK myself up, but that would be a disgusting use of power. The black hat, waiting for him on all fours, laughed. Cat, that is spelled K-A-T, correct? He didn't answer. As he made his way up the side, he marveled at her. Similar to Countess Sigillis of Blanchford, her hands and bare feet seemed impervious to pain or damage. She had traveled up over a broken trail of sharp, unyielding rock, and her feet seemed neither troubled nor dirty. They looked clean and fresh, like she had just emerged from a wash. She was also limber to the point of being rubbery, making him feel like a stiff, immovable doll in comparison. Aren't your feet hurting you on this terrain? She took her left foot and pulled it back and up and over her head and placed it on the small of her back. No. One-legged, she bounded up the side of the mountain a bit more and then stopped. If he didn't know better, he'd say the black hat was showing off. She seemed eager to impress him. She pointed down at the ground. Here we are. She waved her arms, and two hidden doors opened. Rock, moss, and dirt sliding off a stony stairwell led into the earthy dark. Cat used her Shadowtech in a very odd way. Stenstrom couldn't see it. Black cats normally made a grand show of it, having Shadowtech in vast black waves covering the sky. Not this one, not Cat. She used hers in an effective but invisible manner, except for her tail, which moved about like a living thing. Now, you shall go down these steps and enter the room beyond. Within is said to be a face carved on a wall. The face of the destroyer, we've been informed. You will make an impression of this face with this. She held out a small packet of Shadowtech. You will then return and give it to me. I will then release your friends and take my leave. He gazed down to the hole. The stairs went down about 100 feet, where a stout set of wooden doors waited. Laid out on the steps were the torn remains of two bodies, flattened and twisted. My associates, Cat said. They didn't make it. Somebody's rigged the place, made it very dangerous. Poor you. Now go, and do be a good boy and get me what I need. Remember, your friends' lives count on you emerging with my stamp. Stenstrom took the ball of Shadowtech and went down the stairs, musing on what horrors awaited beyond. He stopped. Are you by chance here to investigate the possible coming of the Shadowtech goddess? He could see her smile under her mask. We are always investigating such a thing. It is always a concern. Who is concerned? She crouched down, tail flicking. Who do you think? Now you have your assignment. Fulfill it and your friends shall live. Go on. He neared the bottom. She followed a step or two and then stopped, crouched on all fours. If you survive, perhaps we can fight some more. We can find a nice place where the ground is soft and we can fight. I found it rather enjoyable. Did you enjoy fighting me? He didn't answer and continued down the stairs. When he got to the bottom, he turned to her. What killed your companions? It might be helpful to know. I don't know. There is something guarding that room. Something that killed many of my predecessors, as you can see. I was about to go in there and face the peril, whatever it might be, when you showed up. Better your skin than mine. He turned back to the waiting doors. Why don't you come with me? Perhaps the two of us, with our combined might more easily prevail. The black hat shrieked with laughter. What? Team up? Me and you? Cat and HRN? I'm fine where I am. Now, sir, time is wasting. Your dying friends aren't getting any healthier. He examined the doors and noted a round, Vis-style lock. He tried the doors and they rattled in their frame. Wait, she cried. She produced a folded up slip of paper. What does this say? She bounded down the stairs and held it out by the tip of her tail. Read it to me. It was the note Lady Alesta had left for Aram in his lunch basket. He took it from her. It read, Rami, I've packed your favorite. It will be cold in the north of Cana, and your lunch will help keep you warm. Be sure to share with Belle and Gwen and Morgan. I'll expect to hear all about your adventures when you return. I love you, Bear Bear. Ah, Lady Alesta and Lord Aram, such an endearing couple. He thought of Aram out there in the cold, engulfed in an STT, his life in the balance. He wondered what he would say to Alesta should Aram be hurt or killed. And what about Gwen? Well, what does it say? She demanded as she bounded back up the stairs. It's a private note to my friend whom you have on ice. It's a personal matter full of love and warmth. Nothing that would interest you in the slightest. Stenstrom took the note and put it into his coat and reached for the door again. Have you any thoughts as to what interests me and what does not? She said, tail flicking. Locked. I can blow the doors down for you if you like, Kat said from the top. Stenstrom glared at her and thought for a moment. He shook his hands and produced a set of lockpicks. And so you're a magician as well as a male sister, HRN. Stenstrom pushed the picks into the lock and felt them latch. He expertly worked the lock and the door opened without resistance. He carefully swung the heavy door out, revealing a quiet, pitch-dark space within. With a shake, he returned the lockpicks to his HRN. Before entering, Stenstrom smiled and did his fade into the shadows, a skill taught to him by his mother long ago. He allowed her to watch him fade from sight. Kat looked sideways, trying to see him. HRN, she said. He plunged into the darkness. HRN, she said again from beyond. And with that, we conclude Part 1, Chapter 6, Cat. And so, as I mentioned before, this is the initial appearance of Cat in the League of Elders series. As we know from the Cat readings, Cat has her own book later on. Her story is very similar to this one. She was sent to the ruins of Clovis by the Black Abbess with 3 other Black Hats to gather information on the Shadow Tech Goddess. And as here, her companions get killed, with Cat being the only survivor. But different, in the Cat story, Cat was a crawler, an uninitiated Black Hat. She had the power of Shadow Tech at her command, but didn't know how to use it. Here, Cat is a fully trained, very dangerous Black Hat, and she is of Knife class. The initial incarnations of Black Hats, they came in 2 classes. There was Hammers, who did a lot of fighting, usually with their Holgisman guards, and lots of Shadow Tech, very brutish, very brutalist in their nature as they fought the sisters. And then you have the Painters. They're the ones who hide things and put up cloaks and leave invisible surprises for people. Painters are more artistic in how they do things. Tori Jane of Wham in the previous books was a painter class Black Hat. And that's how they were for a long time. But then as heroes from the League began taming Black Hats, Captain Davidge, they would find that even though they had all this power in Shadow Tech and Holgisman guards, they were very immobile. And if you could somehow get past their Shadow Tech and their guards and so forth, you could take them down because they just kind of sort of stood there and, surrounded themselves in a sten field, making them somewhat vulnerable. Well, after that, the Black App is adjusted a little bit and introduced Knife class, which is a much more mobile, sort of a ninja version of a Black Hat. They still do shadow tech, but they do it much more sparingly. They don't make grand shadow tech things. They just do it very small. It's more of a personal level. And Cat is a Knife class Black Hat. Now that's different from the Knife Stenstrom was talking about. The sisters had selected a sister to be his guide, and they called her Knife, and she looked like a Black Hat, but she was actually a sister. And she was supposed to guide him to the places the sisters wanted him to go. And she was sort of supposed to be, at least in a public sense, his mortal enemy. But as we know from the Belmont books, at the end, Knife got annihilated by Lillian of Gamboa, who took her down. So Knife no longer exists, but he doesn't know that, and he thought Cat was this Knife person. The two dead bodies at the bottom of the stairs were the genesis of Cat's sisters from her own book. As I was working to flesh Cat out, thought, she probably needs some companions, and so I remembered that there were two dead bodies in the stairs going down into this underground labyrinth, the cistern of the Shadow Tech gods. I'm like, well, I'll just make them alive and we'll see how they get killed in a different universe. And so that's the genesis of Cat's sisters. So there's Cat, very different, but she still has that little spark, a little bit of charm. It's much more hidden underneath a lot of meanness, but it's still there. The basics of the characters there, but in a much more primitive form. In any event, Stenstrom is heading in to the infamous cistern of the Shadow Tech goddess, and something scary and deadly awaits him within. And we will find out what that is next week, Part 1, Chapter 7, The Hall of Mirrors. And we will see what there is to see at that time. Until then, this is Ren Presents. I'm your host, Ren. Be well, my compachos. Peace out.